Research and innovations for the public sector, politics and business. News from the department, administration, economics, security, politics at FH Campus Wien.
Welcome to this next episode of my podcast on the research project. Today I have the great pleasure of introducing to you two sociologists who live and work in the Caribbean and whom I had the great pleasure to meet during my field research stay in the beginning of this year, 2024. So I would like to thank you both, Elly Helings in Curaçao and Raymond Jessurun in Sint Maarten, once more for your warm support of my study. And doing sociological research on access to administrative justice in this part of the world was very instructive for me. And now I'm looking forward to our conversation in which you will share your perspectives on the digitalization of public services in Curaçao and Sint Maarten, which are both officially autonomous islands since 2010, but are still part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So it will be very interesting if we can find some commonalities and differences between the two islands concerning access to digital public services. And before we start with the questions, may I ask you to briefly introduce yourselves?
Okay, thank you very much, Julia. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be part of this podcast. My name is Elly Helings, as you mentioned my name already. I'm a sociologist working as an independent researcher and project program advisor in Curaçao and also on the other islands of the Dutch Caribbean. And on those islands, I've been involved in various research projects in the social domain, including studies on the impact of COVID on vulnerable families. And that's where I met Raymond. And however, my primary focus in the research has been lately on youth development in general and also addressing child abuse and relational violence and providing parenting support among others. I think that's a short introduction about the kind of research I do on the islands.
Thank you.
Well, I am Raymond Jessurun. I'm a sociologist, but I was born in Curaçao and have served as a public servant the government of the Netherlands Antilles, the former Netherlands Antilles. But I'm now residing in Sint Maarten and I'm the research coordinator at the University of Sint Maarten. And as such, we have met Julia and have supported her research that was done here. And as Elly told you, our communities are small, so we met each other before in other research projects. That's how we work together, collaborate together. And we have welcomed the University of Applied Sciences of Vienna at the University of Sint Maarten in this collaborative effort to look into this comparison of how digitalization is affecting the public and the public administration. And so the whole thing was how we can get the people for the interviews that Julia was looking for, the entities, and I think we were very successful. Julia will detail how much people and how much entities she got to see and got to interview. And we here in Sint Maarten were very privileged that she already could provide us after 1 month of field work with preliminary results.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you very much. So, maybe we can start with the first question. That would be, how do you perceive the situation in your local context with regard to the digitalization of public services? And for contextualization, how would you briefly characterize Curaçao and Sint Maarten for someone who has never been there, just to get some basic infos in this context? Elly, would you like to start?
For sure, yeah. Now, I think if we particularly look at digitalization within the government, it's not a given. So it's still under development. For a lot of things, you have to go to the government in person. And that has changed a bit because of COVID, because we had very strict rules during COVID and where it was not able to visit any official. Yeah, we had to stay at home. We had very strict rules. So the government had to start digitalizing some kind of help and support due to COVID. And I think that that has helped, but and some services have increased. But we still have our issues and challenges due to the fact that the administration, the data is not easy accessible and is not always up to date. So I think that in general gives an overview of how the situation is concerning digitalization.
Mm-hmm. Can I just ask you what you mean with data in this context?
Yeah, I mean, if we look, for instance, at the civil registry, and we look at another department of the government where they register streets, then they don't have. It is possible they don't have the same database. So streets in the one department of the government are different than the streets in another government. So we don't have any database which we can use to. For example, to have a sample to do research, because there is not such a database available. We don't have the basic administration. It is just not there.
Okay, thank you. What is the situation in Sint Maarten?
Not much different. The push to go online and to send everybody to go online, even to make appointments, or to look up information is there, and that was already before COVID started. And what we see is that there are still a lot of challenges, and where the interest of your research was particularly to look into how is the access to these online services, and everybody had access to the public services. Using digitization, I think that we have now a situation in Sint Maarten that a discussion became more public. As we went public with the research, we tried to get more people involved in reflecting and thinking about it. And we got very good cooperation, especially from some of the radio stations that were present at the presentation, the review of the preliminary results, and that brought some more interest into the community to talk about we have to improve, we have to go steps forward, not step backwards. And so, yes, I'm happy with that development. And this is one of the things that we as university really want to promote, that our research is in service of the development of the people. And the people have to experience that you're doing research to assist them in their development, in the improvement of their development. And this was a very good example of how a researcher from abroad could collaborate with us and provide us with that support to provide the community with that insight.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I can add on that. You see a lot of differences between the different departments. So it's particularly since COVID, but even before already, it is possible to make appointments digitally via email or via digital platforms, to have an appointment to get your passport or things like that. That's available right now. But if we look at someone who needs financial assistance because he is not working, has no income, then at least in Curaçao it's like that. That person is made responsible for collecting all the different data information needed to be able to request the social support, which means that person has to go personally to all those different departments to collect that information, which is really a drempel, how you say it in English. It makes it difficult for people it can be a reason not to request for support, because it's just they can't realize it, all those information. And it wouldn't be if the information, that's what I meant with administrative data, if the administrative data within the public government was organized in a more central way, then it wouldn't be necessary that someone had to go all these different departments to request for that information.
Yeah, that's part of what we call in the literature, it's called administrative burden, right? So it makes
Exactly.
life for citizens very hard in this way.
And I think that is not the idea of digitization, when you can make it possible that once you provide your data or government has those data, that all ministries can use those data. And that there must be a protection, of course, for privacy, but it should not be that every time again, for every time that you come to a new ministry, another ministry, that again you have to provide all those basic information, that basic data. On the other hand, when you have your appointment and when you go to the entity because you got your appointment, you will get another disappointment when the servants, public servants will tell you, sorry, I can't go online because we have no internet. So yes, very good, we can get much more digitization, but basic requirements that you should 24/7 be able to go online. In our situations when electricity drops out and drops down, we have a blackout, there is no internet. And so these are challenges that we see, especially in our societies that don't have backup systems or don't have utility services that are reliable 24/7. That is a challenge for us to participate in a worldwide global digitization. Even when we want to benefit it in our local situation with these challenges that we face and that we see, it can take you some time to do just a bank transfer because of the slow internet speed, because of whatever happened with the internet communication. You can't even access your bank account, or we throw it out again and all of that. So these kind of hurdles, I say, we have to see how we can get that improved also.
Yeah, and I think another challenge is the fact that to be able to make use of these digital services, you need either an email address or a telephone number. Yeah, the telephone number most people do have. Email addresses is not very common. People do have for work-related purposes, but in general, the public does not use email addresses a lot or changes the email addresses a lot. So it's difficult to make use of that in regarding public services, digitalization of public services. And telephone numbers is also a challenge because our telephone providers with prepaid, most people have prepaid phone. And if you don't put money on your prepaid phone within a month, you can lose your number. So which also means that people change telephone numbers a lot. So it's not a consistent information system where you can make use of those, some kind of preconditions. You need to have the email address or the telephone number to be able to use the digital platforms. And that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, it also has to do with financial possibilities. The poverty in Sint Maarten in particular, with most recent census data, we have seen that for the basic needs to be covered, 4 out of 5 persons cannot cover their basic needs monthly. And when we look and when we consider what is basic needs, going online and accessing online your information and your services is now a basic needs, which was not the case 50 years ago. And so the basic package, we know that has increased very, very heavily with all these consumer prices that went up. But when we now include also go online, and then all that, what you need to go online, for telecommunication services, what you have to pay, what you have to go for a smartphone at least, what you have to pay. Now it is a lot of cost. And especially when people are in poverty, it is not easy for them to have these means of communication. I think of seniors where the pensions are very low. They all have actually that bottleneck. They want to have access, They are willing to participate, but they are being excluded because of the means. And it's only when you can address this handicap, I would say, that you can provide them with the means, that you then can also have them online, that you can facilitate them to go online. By saying at school children, for instance, if you don't have internet and computer at home, you can come to school. Now, that is a problem for most of those children because transportation is regulated, but when you have to stay longer at school to do your homework with the computer facility at school, how do you reach home after that? So these are things that nobody actually looks into it when you start to digitize. You do it for your business, your department, or your service. There's so much more that you have then to consider, and that is coming up now that we experience, that we have to look into this seriously and help to improve that situation.
And Elly, in Curaçao, do you also see this situation, as Raymond just described, that actually it seems that the government is not thinking enough of the situation of the citizens as users of these services?
Yeah, in some cases, yes, and particularly the seniors, as Raymond already mentioned, is what we noticed, and that will change over time because it will be a generation that one day will disappear. But you see, with the older generation, they still have difficulties in using digital, or it's challenging for them to use the digital. They don't want to use, not always. So what we saw in the research we did on the impact of COVID on vulnerable families, particularly the elderly said, we prefer to have the contact with the government not digitalized, but in person, either via neighborhood centers or other ways, personal, not via a computer. And that's logical, I think, as it's for them, it's maybe still a bridge too far to use that way of that communication channel. But that will change over years, I think. And most people do have a phone, I think, on Curaçao. And I think in Sint Maarten it's the same, but not all persons have money on it to either make a phone call or use data. And then they depend on the public Wi-Fi. And that's not always either available or stable.
Or safe, maybe even to use safe for all your private data details. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think to add also what Elly said, especially when you want to compare, people think of societies in Europe and in the United States, and then they look at the cost of internet, and that is very, very low because of volume. But when they have to provide those services to smaller communities, small island communities, the cost is very high. And so it's nice to say, yes, it is a good way to go into that direction, but there comes a lot of other economic factors in play and other things that are actually discriminatory in a very structural way. How in our globalization, we have been addressing small island states or small island situations, smaller communities in the world. So this whole development is positive, but it has, in a way, made wider the gap between our island nations and the rest of the world that is in a more developed stage of development.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a broader thing than what we just look at. Okay, simple, I have to get that service from government here. And what's about digitization? It's a bigger complex situation that we have to analyze. And especially for the comparison from the research, I found this very useful that you wanted to make these kind of comparisons where as small island nations, we have other challenges than in bigger countries in the world, in the Western world.
It's very interesting because as you mentioned also before, Sometimes there is no electricity, or even Sint Maarten is also in the hurricane area. So this is, of course, a particularity that can also be very relevant when we think about where are the servers, where is all the data stored and all that, right? But we see this also in several other countries, that the climate and the geography are important. As we already talked about it in the northern part of Canada, for example, when it is very cold, it's difficult to have all the infrastructure, or even when there is only one cable up to the north for the internet and then there's a wildfire. So it can be very threatening also for the people and for the infrastructure. So it's interesting to see, I think, that there are so many different components and factors that can play a role when we think about digitalizing the world as such, but also in particular the public services, because as you said, now internet and access to internet has become a basic good, because we all need to be able to use these public services, and especially when they're only online. And Elly, you mentioned that it is particularly the elderly people, seniors, that have access problems at the moment. But I think it's rather safe to say that there will always be certain parts of the population, because we also talked about poverty, that will have difficulties even in the future, even when it gets more and more normal for people to have access to devices and so on. But yeah, in many parts of the world, internet is still very expensive and there are so many challenges.
Exactly. Yeah.
But even the youth, I can give you the example that we had yesterday. As a university, we were supporting an initiative for the youth of a secondary school to have a what they call a scavenger's hunt in town, for them to see heritage. And for different objects that they had to visit, they had to go online. But they have no money on the phone, no data on the phone to Google. So here you see school thought, okay, this is how we put it together. And they thought, okay, they will be using their Google because this is also what they do in school. But then nobody actually thought of, when these guys that are out there and they have no data on their phone, how can they use Google? And they needed exactly at that moment to describe what is there to answer the questions that were on the paper. So we have experienced that. I had to provide them my phone to do the Googling, and then there was the only one that could do it because the others didn't have. So you see, here you see challenges that was not looked into, and it's always good to prepare those things, whatever you want to do, with more involvement of people that are more knowledgeable about what can we do, what have we experienced already as bottlenecks, if we want to do so, and how can we prevent those kind of things to be more efficient in what we would like to do for them to learn that situation. So it's not only seniors, also youth with their challenges, but that has to do again with money on the phone, has to do with poverty, how much can they provide, how much the parents can provide. And so here you see there's not everything is equal as possibility.
No. And on the other hand, I had an interesting experience last weekend, and it was youngsters introducing a completely new digitalization thing on the island. They organized a Freedom Festival because of the International Day of Freedom on last Sunday. And they had thought out a system. It's really the youngsters and it's a company, but it's only youngsters working there. They had a system where a cashless system. So you were provided in a wrist band with a chip on it, and you bought tokens, but it was all on the wristband. So you could order food, you could order drinks only by showing that wristband, because you had put money on it. I never saw it before, but it was in Curaçao, where a group of young people tried something new. So there are possibilities in another way. It's not government, but I mean, you have different groups on the island where people are they are thinking out new things. So it's interesting to see the difference, I think, and the possibilities that also are there. It's not only limitations.
That's true, of course, that's true. But I think the problem is very often that many of the practitioners tend to be quite techno-optimistic, and technology will be there to create a better life for all of us, ideally. I think if that is possible, that would be great. But I think there are quite a few challenges on the way ahead. So I think we're coming slowly to the end already of our conversation. But I would like to ask you, what if you could give the government, your local government, one or two tips? What do you think they should do most immediately in this regard to provide more equal access for everyone to the public services in a digital era? What would that be?
I see. Yeah, if I can give two advices, as a sociologist, I really would love a system where we can get data out of it to use the data for vision development, policies, etc. Right now, it's very often just thinking out loud, lacking of data. So that's one of the advices. It is possible to create a system to have valuable administrative data, to collect data and have it in a database where it can be, in my opinion, open source, open data, that also researchers and students, all people can make use of it for different learning purposes. So that would be a very, I think it's an important advice. Another advice, if we look at the poverty situation on the island where not everybody is able to buy data for his phone, it must be possible to have more public Wi-Fi areas where students, in neighborhood centers, I don't know, in some places on the island where people can make use of Wi-Fi free of charge.
Okay, thanks. Raymond, what would you say?
Well, I would say, first of all, that the public sector started to follow the private sector in this respect of digitization. And I want to advise our government to become the leader in how can you provide services to everybody in your society, and not only the ones that you want to have in your circle of business. The public administration must be there for everyone, and so provide now and become a leader in how can you come up with solutions, digital solutions that people can see, hey, this thing works for me because I have access, I have even the conditions to have the access. So how can that be stimulated? I would recommend government to become the forerunner. And we have a little experience with that with, for instance, one of our main social services providers in the island, which is a semi-government entity, the SFV. They have become a little bit a forerunner of how can you provide public services for your clients, as they call them, but in a way that it is more customer friendly. And now they are still not there that everybody that they have as a client has been provided with access and technology and with the means to have the access. But this trend of trying to be a forerunner in providing services for all, government is the first call to do that. And I hope that that will be the recommendation that they will pick up.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, both of you, again for sharing all your insights on your islands. Is there any book or publication that you could recommend for people who would be interested in learning more about Sint Maarten and Curaçao and the situations there?
I would recommend reading Brilliant Anarchy by Boody van Leeuwen. He is he's not alive anymore, but it's a person that he lived on the island. He worked for the local government, but he also wrote for the local newspaper. And he wrote in his book Brilliant Anarchy. It's a collection of essays which he wrote, in which he blends some personal anecdotes of his own experiences in his job with some sharp observations on the island's colonial history, political dynamics, and the coexisting balance between order and chaos. So he has a very interesting way of reflecting on freedom, identity, and governance in the post-colonial context. And that's a very interesting, I think if you read and understand that book, you know a lot about Curaçao.
Perfect, thanks. And what about Sint Maarten?
Well, as I said, Sint Maarten is a very touristic island, and so for people to know about Sint Maarten, they go online. So we recommend everybody that want to know more about Sint Maarten, go online, Google it, and then you will see you have a southern part, which is a Dutch part, and you have a northern part, which is a French part, but all the information that is interested for someone from abroad to come to the island is there. And then if you want to know more about the people on the island, there are organizations that you can contact. That is also there so that you can get more information. And I think your recommendations coming for the first time to Sint Maarten was an experience. You did almost everything online to start with, but then still you needed the persons on the ground, the persons in the field to assist. And that is what I always tell every tourist, meet with the people in the island, and then you know much, much more of what we have to offer.
I can only agree with you. Both in Curaçao and in Sint Maarten, I had a very nice time meeting very nice people. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time for sharing. I think it was really interesting to learn more about the situation in these two Caribbean islands. And I look forward to staying in touch and exchanging about our research. And I wish you a very nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Research and Innovations, Department, Administration, Economics, Security, Politics at FH Campus Wien.